He thrust the iron sword into the sand, then buried it with his shoe, and continued forward, repeating the same action. Suddenly the sand loosened, and turned into a whirlpool. Excitedly he called his teammates to dig quickly. After an unknown period of time, a water well suddenly appeared, but looking down, the well seemed bottomless. The sergeant threw down a stone, and the dull sound wiped the smiles off the soldiers' faces. The man was unwilling to give up. He took off his scarf, and with the help of his teammates slowly descended. Finally he reached the bottom of the well. However, the man found only dry sand here. He stood up and felt around, finally touching a moist stone wall. His hand continued downward, until it reached fresh water. He quickly got up and told the good news to his teammates. One of them took out a water bottle and immediately threw it down. In this vast desert, the man dared not waste a drop of water. He hooked the bottle with his toes and poured the water from his palm into it. Soon the small bottle was filled. The man exchanged it for a larger container and placed it in a crevice between the stones. After doing all this, he finally licked his palm thirstily, although he had been thirsty for 3 days. When the water bottle was full, the man tied it with a hemp rope and handed it up to his teammates first. His teammates were cautious, afraid of spilling a drop. Seeing the hard-won fresh water, the soldiers couldn't help but rejoice. But when the water bottle arrived in front of them, they didn't fight for it. Instead, they politely exchanged it. Finally, under the sergeant's command, they each took a sip of the only water they had had in 3 days.
Sweet. Like a woman.
The man still remained at the bottom of the well, not drinking a drop of water until now. When his teammate wanted to take turns for him, he insisted that he wasn't tired at all, and was even happy. 2 captured Nazis were brought in, their lips cracked and obviously on the verge of dying of thirst. The sergeant brought a water bottle, and poured out most of it. The German soldier swallowed hard, but still refused to confess. The sergeant took a sip contentedly, and then poured the rest away directly, in order not to die of thirst. The German soldier finally revealed intelligence. There were about 500 German troops left, but due to the shortage of water resources, the soldier's condition was very poor. Meanwhile, the man was horrified to find that the well was no longer dripping water. Upon learning this, the teammates wanted to retreat, but the sergeant suddenly had a bold idea. Afterwards, the 9-person squad was formed. They brought in ammunition, and then placed the landmines, burying them with yellow sand. The first line of defense was complete. All the soldiers set up their machine guns. Although their numbers were very few, their dedication to their country was unmatched. Soon the German soldiers arrived. They raised their weapons high, though they were almost dying of thirst. Their morale remained undiminished. Teammates were ready, waiting for the landmines to explode at any moment. The Nazis advanced in big strides, and were instantly blown away by the explosion. At the same time, the soldiers began to shoot. Bell also set off in a tank. With each shot fired, the German forces were successfully repelled. The sergeant called out each name, only to find that one man was lost. Without time to mourn, German officer approached, holding a white flag, clearly without malice. The sergeant stepped forward to greet them, first saluting, then beginning negotiations, but the other side was too arrogant, even wanting the sergeant to surrender. The sergeant said nothing, but turned to let him see the soldiers bathing. They showered in the desert, fresh water trickling down swiftly. A Nazi officer swallowed his saliva, while the soldier exaggeratedly scooped up water and splashed it over his body. But actually, the water slipped between his fingers and neatly fell into the iron bucket. The officer seethed with anger, then made a decision. He wanted to offer food in exchange for fresh water. The sergeant, extremely proud, resolutely refused him.
Water for guns. 1 pint for 1 rifle. 1 quart for 1 mortar. That's the deal.
You think this is the time for making jokes?
Water for guns. Take it or leave it.
The sergeant, feigning composure, walked back to the base, but as soon as he stood firm, bullets came flying from the opposite side. There were over 500 enemy soldiers, yet they were only 9. To hold their ground, they had to conserve ammunition, but at that moment, the sergeant felt somewhat helpless, but for the sake of the country, he was determined to defeat the German army. The next wave of attacks quickly began. The Nazis ambushed from behind, forcing the soldiers to retreat. The prisoner took the opportunity to break free, trying to return to his army and tell the officer the true situation. Soldier Tambel noticed in time and quickly chased after him. The two soon fought each other, and the Nazi soldier was successfully subdued. But on the way back, Tambel was shot dead in the confusion. In the final moment, he raised the Nazi emblem and conveyed important information to his teammates.
He got him, Sergeant. He got him.
Yeah, you got him.
Tambel fell to the ground in response, though the position was defensible. Under the weight of numbers, they soon dwindled to just 5. The German troops, lacking water sources, saw a significant decrease in combat effectiveness. Combined with intense warfare and the scorching sun, the officer decided to retreat. He approached again for another round of negotiations, while the teammate crossed the cover, whistling in greeting. The German officer remained arrogant, wanting to exchange food for fresh water.
Oh, no, not acceptable. Water for 1 rifle, 1 pint.
I have offered you the courtesies of war. Your country, we took that easily enough. Accept my terms, or I will send you to hell.
The soldier smiled faintly, swiftly drawing his knife.
Join me.
then pulling out his pistol to kill the accompanying soldier, but when attempting to escape he was shot dead by the Nazis. The sergeant watched the scene, unable to articulate his sorrow. The Nazis loaded shells starting the next round of bombardment. The sergeant returned to the fortress, but found the bullets almost depleted. The bombing continued, with the only tank operator's heroic sacrifice. The soldiers brought him back to the fortress. Suddenly, the sergeant felt overwhelming grief, but the war continued. He could only return to the battlefield and prepare for the next battle. The Nazis attacked again, almost wiping out them all. He loaded bullets, climbed over the cover and onto the tank.
Come on! Come on! Come on! What are you waiting for? We ain't surrendering! Get it over with!
The Nazis raised their rifles, as if signaling surrender.
Water? Water for guns. Oh, that's rich!
The Nazi soldiers ran towards the dried-up well, only to find fresh water gushing out. It turned out their artillery had blasted the underground water up. Thus the two men seized all the weapons and controlled over 300 Nazis. The 9-man squad emerged victorious when the reinforcements arrived. Looking at the scene before them, they didn't understand why and how. Under the setting sun, the sergeant buried his men and silently prayed, hoping they could see the scene.